Hey there, and welcome to another Kidlit chat. I'm your host, Brooke Van Sickle, and I have the wonderful Sarah Surgey with me here. Hey, Sarah, how are you?
Great. Oh, I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing this and for chatting about us.
You're
But for
so
those who are watching who've maybe never heard of you, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and why you wanted to write children's books?
sure. So yes, my name's Sarah Surgey, and I write children's books. And you can probably tell from how I'm speaking today, I'm based here in the UK. But just very excitingly, one of my books is launched in the US this week, The Heavy Bag. So
Mhm.
that's hugely exciting. That's my first book to launch in the US. So yeah, I'm really, really excited for that.
I love
Um,
it. What was the title of it again?
The Heavy Bag, and it's published
Okay.
by Cardinal Rule Press.
Yes.
So yeah, it launched yesterday, so that was just huge, and that's just been an amazing journey. That's been 15 months from start to finish. But obviously it's not really the end because there's a lot to do now. But that's really exciting. But yes, I'm based here in the UK, and yeah, I write children's books.
I
Um,
love it.
which is just I think it's like something that you keep saying it to yourself and you're like, do I actually do that? Because that's just like the coolest job ever. And actually my 7-year-old said to me this morning, Mummy, you have the coolest job. You get to write books. So
Oh, I
um
love that.
I'm really lucky that that I get to say that and I get to do this job. So
Yes. Well, 100%. I'm gonna try that again. Well, 100%. That's awesome. So, because you have 4 books coming out this year, so that's your first US, and you have 3 previous, right?
yeah, so I've already had some books out already, but like The Heavy Bag, Slow Superhero, My House, My Home. But I've got 4 new children's books coming out this year. So with The Heavy Bag, I originally published that myself. So there's a lot of foreign rights going on there. So I think it's been in 16 languages. So each year I tend to have some new editions of that coming out. So that's The Heavy Bag, but new material I've got coming out this year, Cecil's Circus. Um, Another one that I can't actually say the name of yet because it hasn't been announced. I've got Jumping Hurdles that's coming out in the UK in July, and that's written in collaboration with the Dyspraxia Foundation here in the UK, and that's published through HB Publishing. So that's a really, really, really special one to me. And then I've got one with Editions Blue Dot, so it's a bilingual French English. And again, I can't say the title, but that's a book about a climate topic.
Ooh.
So I've got 4 very, very different books with different publishers from different countries, which I know we'll talk a bit more about later. But yes.
Yeah. Okay. So there's so much that I want to ask about because there's so much to unpack there.
Yeah.
One, you had a self-published book and now a publisher has it. Is that what you said?
Yes. So I self-published the Heavy Bag, the English edition, the UK English
Yeah.
edition, um, in November 2020, so 4 years, 3.5 years ago. And then I've sold the rights to different publishers around the world. So Cardinal Rule Press for America being one. But it's gone into French, German, Danish,
Wow.
Swedish, Dutch, Romanian, Turkish, lots of different languages, and they've all um, translated not obviously only the story, but also the main theme. It's a grief book for children. It's about carrying a heavy bag during grief. And it's been amazing actually how just that metaphor has translated into different languages, but cultures as well. So it's really, really, really super interesting. Um,
Yeah.
that just keeps going, the heavy bag.
Yeah. Well, and I read that it's like your specialty to do translations and things. So is
Yeah.
that kind of how you catapult or like what's your background that got you into
Yeah. So I do have a degree in English language and literature. So I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to English, which I
it?
love. And I specialize in children's literature. So I did actually write a crime fiction novel when I was pregnant with my fourth daughter. I think it was just like the hormones, and I was like, oh, I was going to write a crime fiction. So so that was obviously for grown-ups. But I actually learned a lot about publishing, which is a very unique part of being a writer on its own. Like there's so
Yeah.
much to learn. And even when you're under a publishing house, you've still got to know quite a lot about how the publishing industry works. So I learned a lot about publishing. So I wrote this book, this crime fiction book, which was it was okay. And then I was writing for some magazines. So that's sort of commission work where they give you a theme and a word count and a timeline, and you've got to kind of do this as writing. So I was doing that, and the pandemic hit, and I was teaching in the classroom as well, and schools closed, and I ended up being at home, and I was like, well, I have to write. I just have to write constantly. It's just such an outlet for me.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I write for magazines and I write for these different people. What if I just write for myself and write a book? And like I said, I was teaching children, preschool children. I've got 4 children of my own, so I am inundated with children's books. Um,
Yeah.
that's kind of my world, and that's what I know, and that's how I start conversations with them anyway, and that's what I relate to, and that's kind of like our base for everything. Oh, do you remember we read that book? And so it was kind of something that I think I was probably always going to naturally fall into, but I think because of the pandemic and when we had that first proper lockdown, it gave me that time and space to do that, and that's where the heavy bag was born. And then I just thought, well, I want to write more books. But then you actually realize how hard it is to get into the publishing world. And again, that's just a whole nother area, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
crazy.
So let's unpack that publishing journey because,
Yeah.
okay, so the Heavy Bag, your first book you published,
Yeah.
and you self-published that.
Yes.
Um, so we can chat about how that became picked up by
Yeah.
traditional publishers because that's a huge question that so many people have.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
we can also talk about how you became traditionally published with your other books. So
Yeah.
I'm going to start with the Heavy Bag and we can go from
Yes.
there.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So, with the heavy bag, I think, it kind of came about organically, first of all. And I think for people, you need to look at these signs because there's signs everywhere, when you start writing of actually little ways into different areas and what you could branch out into. And a friend of mine who's German just said, oh, I'd love to see this in German. Can I translate it for you? Which was absolutely amazing. But that was something that I learned straight away as well, that publishing houses want to translate themselves. So it's all very lovely to have friends translate books for us. But publishing houses have very specific guidelines, obviously, about how they want that book to sit and reflect. And so
Mhm.
ultimately, publishing houses probably will translate themselves. However, it is okay to have a translation and offer it to publishing houses as a foreign edition, because it can give them a sense of how the book could look. But ultimately, they will want to translate it themselves. Um, so I started with the German, and it just kind of sort of snowballed from there. I mean, I'm quite like that. I sort of think, oh, I could just keep going with something. So then I went to the French, and that was the first one that I'd actually sold to a publishing house, to a French publisher. And that was really interesting, because as the self-publisher, you go from being the author to the publisher, and you get to work alongside a lot of the publishing houses. So I learned a lot again. And then I just kept going. So you do build up contacts. So there were some people who say, oh, I know somebody in such and such publishing house, we can put it in front of them. I think I was saying to someone actually literally today, because they still, could you, sort of recommend this or put me in front of them? It doesn't actually work like that. As much as we would love it to be like that, publishers really do genuinely only acquire books on their own merits of what works for them at that time. They're always happy to talk to somebody who's come through a contact, but the main thing is that you just have to go out there. So all I did was I went through a global publisher's website, and I just chose countries and I found all the children's publishers and I just emailed them. And the more foreign editions that you get, the more you can obviously put that on the book's CV, and then there's a better chance. But I've learned a lot through selling the foreign rights, and you have to put your business head on, which I think as writers we struggle with a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So did you, kind of speaking about that as the business side,
Yeah.
did you have like a big marketing plan, or do you have a big marketing plan for any of your books? Or because I mean, I feel like people would hear that and they think, I'm gonna have to sell like a lot of copies, I'm gonna have to be this huge business person,
Yeah,
what was
it's
your journey?
yeah. So I don't want to put anybody off, because I honestly truly believe that we can all do this. This is totally viable. It's like, honestly, it's something that everyone can do. Um, but you do have to switch your mindset. So to begin with, I think I was approaching foreign publishers as the author, and telling them, using quite emotive language of this book, and I wrote it for this, and blah, blah, blah. That's not what they're looking for. It is very, very business-like. So you do have to switch your mindset. You have to think as a publisher. So how do publishers approach other publishers for foreign rights deals? And they want, statistics. They want to know where that book will sit in the market. Look at the publishing house. There's no point just saying, oh, I just want my book published in French over in France. I can send it off to, children's publishers. Look what each publishing house is already publishing. Would your book sit there with them? So I started to get a bit of a strategy going, but I did that as I was kind of hit the ground running. And then I I actually, so I use Instagram a lot, and that's great for visuals and talking about my books, and just like being a writer in general and connecting with people. But I actually got onto LinkedIn, and I found that for me that opened up a lot of doors. On LinkedIn, people within publishing houses are quite happy to connect with you and actually talk to you. So I've managed to actually send my book over to a few people that way, and it has actually been acquired. So I kind of learned that as well. But you have to kind of not detach from your books. That's really, really hard to do, but you have to start to understand the market, and it's not personal when they say no. And you have to also remember that books, they can take up to 2 years from start to finish. So if you think you're jumping on a trend and your book is relevant now, they've already acquired those books
Yeah.
2 years ago. So, there's so much that you tend to learn as you're going. Um, but I don't quite know how I've done it. I think I've just kept going, and I think you just work through the rejections, because you will get a lot of rejections, and you just need to keep talking to people and stay on their radars. That's one thing I will say with publishers. You can email somebody and you can finally get a contact, and they say, yeah, sure, send it over, and you're like, yes. And then, months can go by, and it's not that they're disinterested. They are so busy. I mean, last month they were preparing for London Book Fair. Straight away they're on to Bologna. Then they've got all their summer releases, and then they're straight into Frankfurt. So they really on this tight schedule. And I think the thing is to stay on their radar. They don't tend to take offense if you then just kind of follow up. So I kind of just stay there, not necessarily emailing them saying, have you read it? Have you read it? Just stay on their radar, stay on them with LinkedIn, stay on their Instagram, just kind of still be there. Don't kind of let the enormity of it all make you kind of shrink. Stay
Yeah.
present, definitely.
That is such great advice. There's so much there that even can apply no matter if you want to self-publish a book or you want to traditional
Yes.
publish a book and all the
Yeah.
things, because
Yeah.
I mean, this is a long game if you're going to be a children's book author.
I think that's absolutely it. I think that's it, because I have so many people message me all the time, and I'm always really, really, really happy to respond to people, because first of all, I know it's like to not be responded to, but secondly, I think actually if you tap into the Kidlit children's writers community, everyone is so supportive, because it is a hard, hard place to be. But that's exactly it. So many people focus on that one book, and if nothing happens with it, then that's it. No, no, no. It is a long game. It's like, you know, uh, somebody said a few weeks ago that one top selling book doesn't make you a successful author. And that is so true, because with each book that you write and try and get published, you start from scratch. I've
Yeah.
got some friends who've written some really, really successful children's books, and they're with big publishers like the big five that we have here, and you probably have there as well. And then they go to their next book and they are literally starting from scratch again. And
Mhm.
that's how it is.
Yeah.
So it's definitely that long game. Start writing in that marketing plan, like that 5 years, what you're going to be doing over the next 5 years. By the end of those 5 years, you should hopefully have a deal. But if you don't before, that's not unusual at all. There's someone
No.
to follow, and she's hugely successful children's writer. And if you go to her website, she openly says it took her 10 years to have
Yes.
her first manuscript accepted, and she's huge here in the UK. Like the big five fall over just to take her now, but that's taken 10 years. So I think you really do have to start realizing that that's how it is. But it's worth remembering that in between, like for those, if you've got like a 5 year plan and you aren't being accepted, you are still a writer. You're still a children's writer. Everything you're
Yeah.
doing, you are doing as a children's writer. You don't suddenly not become a children's writer. You are a children's writer. Every time you do an email, you're emailing as a children's writer. Every time you write down a new idea, you are doing that as a children's writer. Every time you post on social media about something to do with your writing, you are a children's writer. So you don't stop being a children's writer. We just do different things at different times within that career.
Yeah. And sometimes like, we always talk about their seasons too. So like if you're in the selling season or if you're in the writing season, and so if you're not selling something and you're just focusing on writing some stories, that's your
Yeah.
season. Enjoy
Yeah.
it while you
Yes.
can.
Yes. Totally. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Oh man, I feel like I went all off my questions, but that is just it's just all such good advice. Well, let's chat
Good.
about then your next
Yeah.
books, because these were
Yeah.
all with publishers. So kind of
Yes.
did that all of that give you so much confidence that you could just query and tackle publishers or
Yeah, I mean, query, yeah, that is such a huge thing. And again, I think it's a little bit of a marketing game as well now. I don't know if you've noticed, but on Instagram, definitely a lot of the publishers are like, guys, we're going to open up tomorrow, submissions in, and and it's just getting that momentum going. But I think that's good, because I think it means that it has kind of evened it out for everybody, and there's a bit of fun to it, whereas before it was quite, you know, the only thing that they'd say for submissions is make sure it's 1.5 space between, and make sure it's this size font. And but now it's like, yeah, we're going to be opening up submissions for one day, catch us if you can, so I think it's become more jovial, the whole submissions thing, with a lot of children's publishers, not all, but with most of them. But yes, it does give you confidence every time, not every time you're accepted, but every time you actually submit, because you're like,
yeah,
well, that was okay. Like nothing fell off. I'm still here. I submitted, and it is what it is now. So with the different books that are coming out, I tend to go around the houses. I don't know if you have that saying, but that's a British saying called when you go around the houses. So you
yeah,
don't go down that straight line. So you go around the houses and you do things slightly differently. So with my book for Jumping Hurdles, that's out in July this year. That's with HB Publishing in the UK. That's actually, like I said, in collaboration with the Dyspraxia Foundation. And I've got 4 daughters, and my second one has dyspraxia. So we were talking about that quite a lot. And then she said she's older now, but she was like, Mum, there's no picture books out there in the UK with a child with dyspraxia. And I was like, well, you are right. So
you should
I
make
kind of,
one.
yeah, I'm going to make one. And it was kind of tongue in cheek, really, but people like the sort of jumped on it. And Dyspraxia Foundation have just been amazing, and they were so supportive. They were like, yes, we need this book. And then we had a publisher jump on, and so that's been really exciting. And actually I had the illustrations come through today, just the drafts of the illustrations, so that's
So
really
exciting.
exciting. So that's coming out in July, this is all very, very quick for publishing.
Wow.
Because they're trying to hit some deadlines for the Dyspraxia Foundation. We've got a conference, and there's all sorts going on, and we've got a Dyspraxia Awareness Week coming. So there is a timeline. And that is the thing about publishing, that it's always about the timelines, but they tend to be kind of a year to year and a half. So this is happening super quickly. So that's jumping hurdles. Then the bilingual one, French English, that came about because I was doing some ESL editing, which is English as a second language, for a French publisher, Editions Blue Dot. So as I said to you before, publishing houses like to translate in-house, but the golden rule kind of is that you should really only translate into your native language. So although they're translating into English because they like to have the bilingual text, French English, that's a French person who's doing that. So although they are amazing in English, you'll never get that native flow
Yeah.
and rhythm. And so I was editing for them. And then they put to me a book idea that they really wanted to do about a climate crisis for children. So they asked me to come up with a story, which I did. This has taken 2 years so far. And we're just having the illustrations now. So this has taken a long time because I think because of the translation. So we want the translation to sit very similar because the child's going to learn to associate the words. But obviously, when you translate, that doesn't always happen. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot that's gone on with there. But that's been really interesting. And again, just working with the editors and the translators, I've learned a lot again. So that's the bilingual one, which I think is out in October. But we're still coming back and forwards with a title at the moment. So that's that one. And then I have a publisher in Belgium who I started writing for. He acquired one of my books, well, actually, no, two of my books. The Heavy Bag is in Dutch. And then I wrote The Slow Superhero, and that's in Dutch as well. And then he said, look, we've got Kinderboeken Week coming up, which is Children's Book Week in the Netherlands. This is the theme. Would you write a book for me? So I did that last year, and that was My House, My Home. And then they asked me again this year. And all I was given was for a child to be stubborn but nice. And that's just because that's how it translated. So stubborn but nice. So I came up with a girl called Cecile, and she's in the circus because I thought, well, the circus is just draped in, kind of traditions and, well, how nice would that be for a girl to kind of break out a little bit from those traditions and do her own thing? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's coming out. And then I've got another one, but that hasn't been announced yet, but that's very exciting, that
Oh my
one.
goodness. You have so many like fun jobs, fun topics, fun things. Like your 7-year-old is so accurate. I love
I
it.
am
So
very
are you
lucky.
working on
Yeah.
stuff then on the side? Like are you just constantly coming up with manuscripts?
Yeah, so I am. I mean, I've got an agent,
Mhm.
and she's I think got about 10 of my manuscripts now sitting with her, all new stuff. So they're sitting with her. So this is when it then changes. So then you start publishing books, and then you've got a better chance of getting an agent. This is my second agent. So the first one it didn't work out. This one she's amazing, and so she's actually off to Bologna next week. So she'll represent me and her other authors there. So she'll take our manuscripts. She's booked in meetings with publishers because certain publishers will only talk with an agent still.
Yeah.
So that's where she sort of comes in. She does the contracts, all those kind of technical things. But I'm really super lucky because she's an editorial agent, which you don't often get. But she worked in children's publishing, so she edits my manuscripts. Like she's amazing. So she's got 10 of them, but those 10 manuscripts could sit there now for a few years, because it really is about the timing. And actually, as I've written some of them, I think there's two of them that I've now seen out by somebody else, like exactly the same. One of them had the same title. I was like,
Oh my God.
what?
I think the universe gives people ideas and just sprinkles it. And is like,
Yes,
this book needs out. So
yes,
who's gonna
yeah.
get it first?
Yes, yeah. So she's doing that. So that really there's nothing that I can do at the moment because I don't like to sort of force my writing. I can do like sort of bursts of it and I could just like write. So I do a little bit of ghostwriting picture books for people. So I'm just working on someone's at the moment. So that just kind of keeps that creative outlet going. And I
Yeah.
just put all what I know into their manuscript, which is fine.
Yeah, you're busy. But are you going to celebrate your launch, especially with your new US release? That's exciting.
Yeah, so
What
I
are you
had
celebrating?
yeah, so we had a virtual book launch for the US one, where that was a virtual book launch, and I think we had about 100 people come to that. That was quite funny because I was just sort of sitting there with the team at Cardinal Press, and they're like, "We're going to open the doors up now virtually," and you just saw these little cameras pop up and pop up. So that was really, really exciting. It is different because obviously I'm not in the US. But I think because of how things work now, it's okay. I'm going to do a lot of, sort of virtual readings and things like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess nothing beats actually being there. So maybe one day I
You
would
could just do a family vacay to
I
the
would
States
love
and then
to.
just
I'd
write
love
it all
to.
off.
Yes, yes, yeah. I've got quite a few friends in the States, so they've been kind of like, yeah, keeping me informed.
Yeah, yeah. Come over to our library,
Yes.
come to our bookstore. Yeah.
Yeah.
So fun. Well, Sarah, I could talk to you for hours, but
Okay.
this has been
You.
super, super informative. Before we
Oh,
leave, though, is there like one last piece of advice you would give authors that would just be like your best advice for them if they're wanting to get published someday?
yeah. So, what I always say to people is, if they want to be published, you do need to split yourself down the middle and think author, publisher, and not necessarily that you want to self-publish. If you want to approach publishers, you need to be thinking like them. So you do need to, because we're very creative. So that's your creative writing side. Disassociate that, get rid of that emotive language, and go into that business as a publisher. Approach them as you know they are approaching others.
Yeah, I think that's so smart. And if you don't know how to do that, just read some back cover copies, go to go and listen to some publishers speak and things, and you'll
Yes,
get a sense of how they think
yes,
because they do very business.
yes, yeah,
How can we sell this book? I love it.
yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for spending the time and for doing this.
Oh,
This has
you're
been
so
so amazing.
welcome. It's been lovely chatting with you. Thanks, Brooke.